So, before I dive right in, I just want to say, if you have not seen No Way Home yet, then don't watch this video. Don't watch it at all. Wait until you can see it. Just go see this movie. This movie's a blast. I really want to see it again, but I'm gonna wait a little bit because it's really busy with the holidays and all that. And there's a bunch of other things coming out. So I'm gonna wait a little bit to see this again. But right now, I kind of just want to get this out of the way. Let's talk about Spider-Man No Way Home, spoilers and all. I've been wanting to talk about this movie in depth since I saw it, and I really felt like with my initial review, I really couldn't go in depth with a lot of things in this movie because there's just so much that happens in this movie that there's no way that you can avoid this movie without spoilers. I seen after seeing this movie, I looked up a lot of the things on the internet, and yeah, they were all out there. And I'm mad that people are in theaters recording some very big scenes, and they're putting it online. And I'm like, no, see this in the theater. It's really impressive seeing this in the theater. And there were so many moments in this theater that made my audience cheer. And I'm going to talk about them. And I'm just so mad that people are doing that. I understand that people are not going to the theaters right now because things are really bad with this pandemic. And I'm concerned myself too, but that's for a different time. But I'm going to talk about this movie in depth, at least from my first thoughts on this movie, because I'm going to try to see it again at some point. So let's get into it. I'm not going to go by, scene from scene by any means, but I'm just going to talk about the things that really stood out to me. So let's get into the big thing automatically. Let's talk about this. Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, yeah, they both appear in this movie. And it's not like a quick cameo for anyone. It's not like it's on a final battle where it's like, oh, Spider-Man can't deal with all these villains by himself. Well, here comes Tobey and here comes Andrew. No, they're actually in this movie for a good amount. I would say at least halfway through. They come in, you see in the movie, Ned and MJ, they're at Ned's place, and he has, that little thing from Doctor Strange where it can make portals, and I guess there is magic in Ned, which I guess makes sense, which, no, it doesn't really. Ned's like, oh, there's, magic in my family, so he's like, he does that, and that's how it's supposed to come out, how it's supposed to happen. So, he does it once, and he's like, oh, I just wish I could see Peter, and then all of a sudden you just see Andrew Garfield coming in. When he took off his mask, my audience just clapped and cheered. Immediately I did. Even though I'm not really a big fan of Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man movies, which I'm going to talk about in another video where I kind of rank all the Spider-Man movies. But as for right now, I'm really glad that he got a lot of praise for this. And he's really good in this movie too. I'm really glad that Andrew Garfield is really good in this movie. He's on a roll this year. He was really good in this. He was really good in Tick, Tick, Boom. He was really good in The Eyes of Tammy Faye. And also in this movie, he's kind of a different character in this movie. You definitely tell him that he's been he's been dealing with a lot. Obviously, at the end of Amazing Spider-Man 2, he couldn't save Gwen Stacy when she died. And, that's very upsetting. And you kind of can tell he's kind of he's a bit calmer after that, definitely. But he still has that spirit of Spider-Man, I guess. And I really do feel bad for him. I did criticize his movies, but I feel like those weren't really Andrew Garfield's fault. I feel like it was just the creative team as well as Sony's fault. So I'm just really glad I got to see him again, and I really kind of want to see more of him. There are rumors that he might be coming back, and I really liked seeing that. Also, when Tobey appeared, he kind of did the same thing, where Ned did the same thing. He's like, find Peter Parker. And then all of a sudden, Peter Parker comes in, you don't know what's going on with him. He's just wearing, a regular shirt, but later it's revealed, oh, I have the Spider-Man suit underneath here. So, and they kind of have their own thing. I kind of like their moments with Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Their chemistry is really good. They kind of have, all their comparisons and such. At one point, Andrew and Tom are like, well, we have web shooters. So he's like, you guys have web shooters? It's just organic for me. And they're like, does it come out of anywhere else besides the wrist? And Toby's like, no, just the wrist. And, that's kind of fun. I thought that was kind of jokey. And it was nice to see, the comparisons between the three in a nice, wholesome way that's not, volatile or anything. And, there's that moment where they're talking about, the villains they fought. Tom Holland's like, oh, I fought an alien. And Toby's like, well, I fought an alien goo. And Andrew's upset because he's like, I never fought an alien. But they're like, oh, you're amazing. Don't worry about that. And, I'll let it slide. I'm going to let this slide. That was an obvious in-joke, but I'm going to let it slide. And anyway, I like their chemistry together. I also really like their scenes where they're actually kind of being Peter the scientist and not being Peter Spider-Man. I also really liked them. I thought they were an interesting take on the character. I thought it was an interesting side to see of these characters that we didn't get to see too much in the other movies, which, we got brief glimpses of, but we never really got into it. There were a lot of in-jokes that worked. Their teamwork, could use a little bit of work. Now they tried to argue, well, they never really worked with teams before. Tom Holland has worked with the Avengers before, and I kind of had mixed feelings about that. One, didn't Toby kind of work with, Green Goblin at the end of Spider-Man 3? Also, didn't Andrew Garfield kind of work with Gwen Stacy a bit, and also the New York Police Department? It just guess it wasn't a big deal because, they're on their own and they're not Avengers, so oh well. And I really like some of the individual moments that brought some closure, like we kind of saw in the trailer that MJ's falling and Tom tries to catch her, but he can't, he misses. And so Andrew comes down to save her. That was a great moment. That was a wonderful moment, and it really brought closure to his character. Even though there's going to be, I hope there's a lot more of Andrew Garfield in the near future with Spider-Man. I feel bad for him. He should get another chance. They might, and I'm going to talk about that later in this video. Also, Toby with Doc Ock. I thought that was a great moment between the two. Kind of reminiscent of their ending from Spider-Man 2. And when the score from that movie played, I started tearing up, admittedly. Those movies meant a lot to me as a childhood. Well, at least the first two, not three. But those two movies especially, they were awesome. And I'm really glad that it didn't feel cheesy too. Like, these moments could have been really cheesy, really forced, and they weren't. I really like those scenes. And also there's this big moments where, pretty much every villain is cured. I'll kind of talk about that a bit. But, Tom has just had it with Green Goblin. He's, starting to beat him up at the end. But then, he's about to, control... But then Green Goblin's like, oh, this glider's gonna kill you. But then Toby comes in, and the glider hits him. And I'm like, are you gonna kill off Tobey Maguire? Are you gonna kill off Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man? And, they don't. They kind of make a joke about it. It's like, where Andrew's like, are you okay? And it's like, not really. But I guess, I guess he's fine. I hope he's okay. I hope they're both okay. And, they're transported back into their universes. Hopefully okay. But, we didn't really get to see them after that moment. So I'm kind of wondering, what happened to them afterwards? I don't know. But overall, this could have been, really, goofy and really cheesy. And it could have been only a few minutes. But I'm glad I got a lot more out of them than I would have expected from them. Now let's talk about the villains. The 5 main villains. Now, some villains really impressed me. Some I thought were better than the villains in their other movies, I would say. And here's how I would rank them. Number 5, I would put Sandman. Now, Sandman's a tragic villain. So I kind of feel like he's more of a reluctant villain because he does fight Spider-Man in Spider-Man 3. And he was the best part of Spider-Man 3. Here, he's one of the worst parts of No Way Home. And I say that because all he does is complain, what's going on? What's going on? You're not Peter. And it was also, what was he kind of doing in this movie? Because, they mentioned all these villains die at the hands of Spider-Man. Well, not really at the hands of Spider-Man, but they all die fighting him. And I thought, wait, didn't Sandman live? He was, the only villain to live in one of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies, so what's he doing here? I don't know. Also, he's insane the entire movie, which, okay, you only kind of see him as Flint Marko at the very end, not Spider-Man, not Sandman, I mean, but it just, I don't know, I felt like he was the weakest of all the villains in this movie. And number 4, I'm going to put Lizard. Now, I didn't really care for Lizard in The Amazing Spider-Man, but that's mostly because they cut out a lot of things from that movie. And his plan was just so stupid. Here, he's kind of just an extra character. He doesn't really do anything other than, make poses. He runs, he breaks things. And, you do feel bad for him. And I guess because, at the end he kind of gets some redemption. He's cured. But, you could say that about all these other villains in this movie. And I just felt like he also didn't really need to be in this movie. Also, kind of like Sandman, he didn't die in Amazing Spider-Man. He was in the end. He was in a jail cell. So, I don't know why they had him in this if he was just going to die. So, if they said he was going to die, and it doesn't really make sense to me, why they had him, or Sandman, really. It's okay, this is more of a fan servicey thing. So, I don't know. Those were my 2 weakest villains, in my opinion. And number 3, I'm going to put Doc Ock. Now, I really liked Doc Ock in Spider-Man 2, and when I saw him here, I was, super excited. And unlike the Spider-Man 2, which was all practical effects, this one's more CGI. And I kind of wish we got a little bit more of Doc Ock as a villain and kind of more of the tragedy, but they kind of fixed that bit a bit, where it's they fixed that chip at the back of his neck. and instead he's like, oh, and he kind of saves everyone else at the end, so he kind of joins the Spider-Man at the end. So that I thought worked. Um, Also, I kind of thought it was interesting when on the highway, and Doc Ock is like, okay, he's got Peter, but you're not Peter Parker. You're not my Peter. And then because of the suit, Peter just changes the tentacle arms to basically go with him and just not with Doc Ock, not with Otto Octavius. So I thought it kind of like dawned on me while watching. It's like, wait, they mentioned that all these villains were like about to die, and yet, like, at the time of Otto's death, he was basically not necessarily cured, but like free from that prison in his mind a bit from because of the tentacles and such. But so to see him kind of be like this bad guy who's trying to kill Peter, it just didn't really make too much sense at first. And then that's kind of what I said in my non-spoiler review. Characters don't act like the characters they did. And while sometimes it works, sometimes it didn't. Doc Ock is one of the few times where it didn't for me. But I did like his turn at the end where he becomes the first villain that's kind of reformed, and he stays that way until the very end of the movie. So I thought that was interesting. Number two, I'm going to put Electro. Now, I didn't really like Electro in Amazing Spider-Man 2. I thought he was a bad, like, Jim Carrey in Batman Forever. And the fact that Jamie Foxx did it, and it was just so embarrassingly bad. And the stupid things that happen in that movie, like the way he acts when he's thinking about Spider-Man, and the stupid moment when he falls into the vat of eels and the electricity fixes the gap in his teeth. That's just so stupid. And here, he's actually not a stupid character. He's actually not a crazy person. He's actually kind of a villain, like a legitimate villain. And now I mentioned, like, Jamie Foxx kind of acts like his character from Baby Driver a bit, which I kind of noticed about halfway through is like, aren't you just doing what you did in Baby Driver a bit? Maybe change it up a bit. And, I kind of like a lot of his moments with Andrew Garfield towards the end. I liked how, at the end he has this talk with Electro, and he's like, Jimmy and Andrew, they talk, and like he finally sees Spider-Man for who he is, and he's kind of disappointed that he's white, and it's like, I kind of thought you were gonna be black, and like, okay, I think that's kind of a nod to Miles Morales, and I'll talk about him towards the end of this video because I do have some ideas about what they could do next. And then number one, Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin, the best villain in this movie, and again, another tragic villain, and they really do play that up a lot more in this movie, even though they don't really show it too much. And also really like how in this movie, like, Willem Dafoe just kind of like goes between Norman Osborn and Green Goblin without cuts. Like, in the first Spider-Man movie, they had like either Norman Osborn just talking to the mask or talking to Green Goblin in the mirror, and they were like cutting back and forth for the most part. And you can definitely tell they were cutting between that. But here, no cuts whatsoever. And I really liked what they did with his villain. I really liked a lot of the in-jokes where he's like, I'm a bit of a scientist myself. And with each new viewing of Spider-Man, and probably when I watch this again, I feel more and more bad for a lot of these villains. Mainly Norman Osborn and Otto Octavius. But other than that, I kind of feel bad for all these villains mostly. Okay, maybe not Lizard, but that's a different story. So overall, that's how I would rank the villains. Now I'm going to talk about the other characters in this movie a bit, like MJ, Ned, Aunt May, Doctor Strange. And, MJ, with each new movie, Zendaya appears more and more in these movies. Like, she had a few scenes in Homecoming, a few more scenes in Far From Home, and now in No Way Home, she's basically one of the main characters. And I really like the relationship she has with Tom Holland in this movie. I do think it's a realistic relationship. It does really seem nice. And I guess I heard rumors they're dating. I don't know. But, like, I do like her character throughout this entire movie. I do like their relationship. Also, Ned in this movie. Ned, read the room, dude. Ned is a good guy, but, dude, don't be the third wheel. Don't be the third wheel. And also, because he has magic, there are rumors that he might be a villain in another movie, because there is that mention where, Toby and Andrew mentioned to Ned, oh, by the way, we had best friends who became arch enemies of us. And and Ned's like, uh-oh, should I be worried? Well, we'll kind of talk about that in a little bit, because they're not friends anymore at the end of the movie, as you'll see. And meanwhile, we're moving on to Aunt May. She has a little bit more to do. Like, we see her work with Feast a bit. And, she kind of introduces Willem Dafoe to Tom Holland a bit. And, at the end of her role, and I'm not going to say at the end of the movie, because you know what happens, during that big apartment fight, Green Goblin has his glider, and it goes basically through Aunt May. Not literally, but it just scratches her, I think. Again, I couldn't really tell, but like you could tell at that moment, like something bad's happening. Like this is the first time in any Spider-Man movie you see anything really bad happen to Aunt May. Well, not really. This is the first time that you see Aunt May die in a Spider-Man movie, and I'm like, okay, this movie's going there. This movie is definitely going there, and I was just kind of shocked because like it's Aunt May. How could you do that to her? And then at the end, like I don't know, I kind of felt mixed about her death at first because like, and I still feel mixed about it because like, at first it was like, okay, what's going on here? What's going on here? Is Aunt May dying? Like, and it kind of takes a while for Peter to kind of get it, but I'm not gonna be too mad about that because I would be shocked if like someone I've known like that is just killed instantly like that. I would be shocked by that too. And some would say that she was fridged, and I guess I kind of agree with that, to be honest. Like some say Gamora was fridged in Infinity War, but I bought into it, and I bought the way that she was brought back. But like here she was kind of fridged, and at basically her last words were, with great power comes great responsibility. And I'm like, really? No one told him that before? I know Tony didn't, but Uncle Ben didn't tell him that? But then again, Uncle Ben doesn't matter in this universe, so I guess I'll buy into it? Again, we didn't really see anything from Uncle Ben, so I guess I'll have to deal with this. I feel mixed about her death. I kind of understand what they're going for, and like Peter needs something to really fight for this time. He doesn't have Iron Man anymore, and now he's just basically on his own. He literally has no way home after this movie. And it's an interesting twist. I don't know if it worked out all the way, I guess, but we'll move on. Doctor Strange, honestly, he's barely in the movie too much. He does the spell. He gets annoyed with Peter a few times because Peter wants to make all these changes to the spell. Like, oh wait, Ned has to know. Oh wait, MJ has to know. Oh wait, I think Happy should know. And he's like, what about Happy? And he goes, I'm not happy. I'm annoyed. Or Aunt May has to know. And that was funny, I guess. And he kind of disappears for a bit because in the dimension fight, Peter just leaves him behind, and he doesn't come back until the Statue of Liberty fight. So again, it's not really, I'm too mad because they didn't really show Doctor Strange too much. Like, I guess I expected a lot more. I kind of guess, maybe I expected like a team up a bit, but that doesn't really happen. It's more of a team up between the three Spider-Men. And meanwhile, we got the cameos, one by Matt Murdock, Daredevil himself, which was a cool, fun cameo. It was funny, like when the brick comes through the window and he catches it with his cane, and they're like, how do you do that? And he goes, well, I'm a really good lawyer. And you're like, yeah, that's why you saw that brick, even though you're blind. But anyway, cool cameo. I'll try to review Hawkeye when that's over. Meanwhile, in the mid-credits scene, we see Eddie Brock return. Even though at first I thought it was just like a throwaway gag, because he was just there, at the end of Let There Be Carnage. He was transported into that universe, and he's like, I gotta go after Spider-Man. But the next time we see him, he's at a bar, trying to understand, like, what happened. Like, someone explains the events of Infinity War and Endgame a bit, and then he's transported back. Okay. So, that was mostly just throwaway, so now he's just back in his own universe, I guess. But there was a little Venom symbiote left in the MCU, so are we going to get Venom in the MCU now? I kind of have a few ideas. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. And anyway, let's talk about the fights for a bit. They were really cool, mainly the highway fight with Doc Ock and Green Goblin. That was a lot of fun. The apartment fight between all 5 villains and Spider-Man was also really good. The Statue of Liberty fight was fine, but yes, it was mostly cool because, like, it's all 3 Spider-Man fighting all these villains. So that was really cool to see. And anyway, let's move on to the ending, because I have a lot of thoughts about this ending, because at the end, Strange can't control his spell, all these villains might be coming in, and, they cure all the villains, which, by the way, the idea to cure the villains, I thought that was an interesting take. It's like, oh, okay, I don't want to kill these villains, I want to, make sure that, they go back to normal, so they don't have to, die at my hands or anything like that. So I thought it was an interesting and definitely different from all the other Spider-Man movies, but, then later on it's like, no, I'm going to kill Green Goblin, so, I don't know. I kind of like the idea, but, I don't know. Anyway, moving on. the ending, Peter just says to Strange, no, just make everyone forget me. Forget that I was Spider-Man. Forget that I was even born, really. So Strange does that without MJ, because like MJ was basically like, I don't want to say she was like Spider-Man, but like she was his like go-to, I guess. Like he would tell her everything, and like he did this without consulting her. So she's like, hey, when this happens, come find me. And, afterwards, Strange makes a spell, and then he goes to see Ned and MJ at the coffee shop she works at. And they both got into MIT. Was it MIT? I don't remember. But they got into college, the college that they were initially said no to because all the events that happened in Far From Home. And so now they're in college. Peter goes in the shop. He's like, oh, hey, I'm Peter Parker. And they're like, okay. And that was interesting to me. Like, is that because like at the end of Spider-Man, he can't be with Mary Jane because he's worried that someone will go after her? Is that what Tom Holland is thinking at the end of this? I feel like it is a bit. And then moving on, he visits Aunt May's grave, which somehow that basically everything in this movie still happened. Like Aunt May's dead still. So and then Happy visits her grave as well. They meet for the first time, at least after what happened, and Happy doesn't recognize him either, and so he gets an apartment. Would have been really cool if they had like a cameo from that apartment landlord from the Sam Raimi movies, but oh well, missed opportunity. So anyway, he gets an apartment, he makes a new suit, he's still Spider-Man, he doesn't have anything, none of the Stark technology. So it kind of, I feel like it does make a lot of sense. He kind of really relied on Tony Stark a lot, at least basically until this moment. So to kind of like be this character now who has all this, all this power, to have basically just be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man now, kind of, I don't know. I kind of felt mixed about the ending walking out of it, and I kind of get what they're going for, but maybe I need to see it again to feel like I need to see it again in order to have like a firm idea of what I feel about it. So anyway, moving on to possibilities for the future for Spider-Man. Like we saw the Venom symbiote, so there may be a moment with the black suit at one point. We saw him in the black suit at one point, so there may be stuff about that. It could be interesting to see that. Like, will they have an Eddie Brock in this universe, a different one? I don't know. Also, there's a little nod to Miles Morales in this. Like I mentioned earlier, Jamie Foxx goes to Andrew, is like, I thought you'd be black or something. You were from Queens. And no, not exactly, but it happened. So I'm curious to be like, I kind of do want to see Miles Morales in this universe. Maybe Peter could train him at one point, and then because like in Homecoming you saw Donald Glover as Aaron, and he's like, I got a nephew, and obviously that was a reference to Miles Morales. So I'm like, yeah, bring Miles into this, for crying out loud. He's great. I would love to see him in a live action movie. There's rumors of another trilogy of Spider-Man movies. Something with the black suit, something with Miles. Just something else, maybe. I really would like to see him. Also, Venom, Morbius are going to be... we saw Venom briefly in this universe. He's transported back. I wonder what Morbius will do. That's coming out next month. Hopefully it's still coming out next month. With everything going on, I have no idea anymore. And I'm kind of curious, like, you saw, like, in the Morbius trailer, Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man in the background. Not necessarily him, but, like, a picture of him. So I'm kind of curious, like... is he going to appear in this movie? Not necessarily appear, but are they going to connect it to that universe maybe? Because they were trying to do that for a long time. Maybe they will. I don't know. We'll have to see. And also Venom in the MCU. What are they going to do with that? Again, the black suit would probably work. But, these are just teases. And I'm glad, like, unlike Amazing Spider-Man 2, which was just nothing but teases, these are teases that are just subtle and they don't overshadow this movie. I would say this movie is kind of like with Into the Spider-Verse. This movie is basically a tribute to Spider-Man. This movie, I may have complained about a lot of things in this movie, but honestly, the last few days, I've just been out of it. I've just been overworked. I've been tired. But Spider-Man No Way Home is the only thing that's kind of kept me going, surprisingly. I've been really happy about this movie. I've been so excited to talk about it. I've loved this. I enjoy this movie. I might raise my rating to 3.5 out of 4 because how much I loved it. I haven't been this happy about seeing a movie since, I don't know, probably Endgame. So, A lot of it does, I feel like a lot of it does work. A lot of the fan service worked. A lot of the emotional moments work. And I feel like this is my favorite movie of this trilogy of movies. And a lot of things I was worried about, I knew I wasn't worried about. Like, I was worried about the film having too many villains, because you know what happens when a Spider-Man movie has too many villains. And this movie basically does most of them well, except for like Sandman and Lizard, but those are just opposite. Those are just problems that are just not really problems, but they're noticeable. And even though some moments I do have questions about, I might feel differently after a second viewing. All I'll say is that I really enjoy this movie. I hope people do check it out. Obviously, people have checked it out. It's the second biggest opening of all time. But I just hope more people see this movie. I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. I'm definitely seeing this again. I haven't been this happy about a movie in a long time. And not like a movie where I've been like singing the praises of, like, I don't know, like Dune, for instance. I don't know. But I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed this movie. I'm definitely going to see it again at some point. Again, I'm going to wait a bit because things are not looking good with COVID. So I do enjoy this. Maybe I'll have some thoughts about it afterwards. So tomorrow I'm going to try to do a ranking video of all the Spider-Man movies from the worst to the best, including this movie. So look out for that. What did you think of No Way Home? Spoil away. Comment down below. Subscribe to the channel. This is Pat. Stay safe.